What's going on, guys, and welcome back to WrestleRant, where every single Tuesday I, Graham Jason Matthews, break down all the pay-per-views that I watch on the WWE Network as well as on the Global Wrestling Network, which is where today's show comes from, TNA Lockdown 2005. One of those shows where you know Vince Russo had a lot of heavy involvement just because every match in the show was surrounded by a steel cage, and that was the gimmick of Lockdown for many, many years, for as long as it was around in TNA. But honestly, one of, if not the best TNA show that I've seen on the Global Wrestling Network since I started doing these reviews late last year. That's how good the show was. And maybe it was because the main event was so good, but like there weren't a lot of bad matches, there weren't a lot of like bad shit like there has been with some of the other shows. Like some matches that would be like, well, that was garbage, that was terrible. And you had a few of that on this show, but nothing offensively bad, and a great main event, which is what a lot of these TNA shows were lacking in those early years. You had a lot of overbooking and a lot of Jeff Jarrett bullshit. Thankfully, they saved that for the co-main event, which even then wasn't that bad. But let's get started here with the opener. And again, like I said, every match had a steel cage element to it. I'm including the opener. It was a 6 sides of steel cage match with Apollo and Sonny Sakai beating Chris Candido and Lance Hoyt. The match really wasn't anything special. It wasn't bad. And, all four people, all four guys had their moment to shine, and they had their signature spots. They hit their signature spots, and they had their time to shine, blah, blah, blah. The only thing that this match is really known for, unfortunately, is for Chris Candido getting hurt. Chris Candido got hurt early on, and it led to him missing some action, missing some in-ring time in the weeks that followed. And then soon after that, he actually had he had a blood clot and died. A blood clot and died, which is crazy. So this was Chris Candido's, I believe, final match? I don't think he wrestled after this because he got hurt in this match. But it was a whole controversy after that. Did they leave the match on the DVD release and all that other stuff? It's on the Global Wrestling Network, obviously. Otherwise, I wouldn't be talking about it. But which is pretty crazy, yeah. So Chris Candido, again, I believe his final match here, because he got hurt and then he had a blood clot and died. Like less than a month later, and it's not funny, but I'm just saying it's crazy. It's really some scary shit. But that was the opener. As a match, it really wasn't anything special beyond that. We had a Prince of Darkness match after that. It was basically a 2 out of 3 falls match between Dustin Rhodes, obviously Goldust, and Bobby Roode. A match we could still see in WWE today over 10 years later. Over 13 years later, you could see Goldust versus Bobby Roode on Raw. But back in 2005, it was a lockdown match. Like I said, a Prince of Darkness match. 2 out of 3 falls match, where the first 2 falls were normal, and the third fall was a fucking blindfold match. This went way longer than it needed to. I mean, the commentators were into it. The crowd was kind of into it. But as a match, it really wasn't that good, like at all. The first 2 falls were fine at best. And then the third fall, the fucking blindfold shit just ruined it for me. Blindfold matches can be either just really entertaining or really, really bad. And more often than not, they fall in the latter category. This was not good at all. I mean, it was Bobby Roode didn't even win. It wasn't like the new guy went over or the fresh face went over. No, Dustin Rhodes won, which was kind of weird. But yeah, this was pretty bad. After that, for the I was going to say for the X Division title, it was not for the X Division title, though it was an X Division match. A 4-man escape match between Shocker, the guy from the McDonald's commercial they made a huge deal about the last pay-per-view, Shocker, Matt Bentley, Sanjay Dutt, and Chris Sabin. This was a pretty good match, as is always the case with the X Division. There was some minor nitpicking stuff, like why wouldn't they go out through the door when the door was already opened, or like why were they breaking up pinfalls when it was every man for themselves, and it was, I think, elimination style. Shocker ended up winning. With the nitpicking stuff, that can be said about pretty much any steel cage match ever. When it comes to why didn't they just go out through the door? That whole thing. But beyond that, they had some real cool sequences here. I thought they worked well together, and they put together a real fun match for the 16 minutes they were given. In a 6 sides of steel tables match. So basically a tables match that took place inside a steel cage. Raven and Jeff Hardy. This was one of the better Jeff Hardy matches I remember from that time, from the other pay-per-views I've seen from that time in TNA. I thought they worked real well together. Their styles meshed perfectly. They were both hardcore guys, so it made sense that they could work well within a tables environment. They had some cool spots. Jeff Hardy, obviously thriving in the steel cage match environment, falling off the top of the cage, off the side of the cage, all this other shit. Jeff Hardy did end up winning. I mean, Raven, I think, would go on to win the NWA title soon after, so I'm not really sure why he lost here. There was like one botch, but it was, wasn't anything too big. Didn't ruin the match for me, is what I'm saying. This was entertaining. I thought this was really, really good and one of the better tables matches I've seen in recent memory. After that, for the NWA World Tag Team titles, we had America's Most Wanted taking on Team Canada's Eric Young and Petey Williams. This was a great match. America's Most Wanted have really been the MVPs of these TNA pay-per-views since I started reviewing them late last year. They have consistently one of the best matches on the show every single time. And this was no different. It was your typical steel cage match, but it had a great match, basic story that worked for it. It was a strap match, actually. I forgot to mention that. It was a 6 sides of steel strap match, but you would never know that the straps would be involved because they never really got involved. For the most part, you would never really guess that this was a strap match, is what I'm saying. The straps weren't really necessary, but it was a great effort from both teams, and I really enjoyed this. I thought it was a great showcase for the tag team division in TNA. This was awesome. And America's Most Wanted went over, and still the NWA World Tag Team Champions. After that, this was for the X Division Championship in a 6 sides of steel match, steel cage, whatever. Christopher Daniels defending his title against Elix Skipper, 2 former partners. Obviously, they were teaming up at some of the other TNA pay-per-views in 04 and 05. They clashed on this show with a gold up for grabs. Great match. Again, they were going for the story where they're former friends, they're former partners, or they know so much about each other. And it was going to prevent one guy from beating the other because they all pretty much knew their respective arsenals inside and out. But Elix Skipper, in storyline, of course, did suffer a shoulder injury over the course of the contest, which Daniels capitalized on and used that to his advantage to win the match and retain the title. So again, I thought this was a great match. An awesome showcase for the X Division once again, and the right guy going over with Daniels retaining his title. Next up, we had a Lethal Lockdown match, which I'm not sure if this was the first one, but it was definitely among the first few, and it would go on to become a big staple in TNA in the years that followed. So essentially, in this match, it featured 3 people, and there was no top on the cage. Like with feature Lethal Lockdown matches, you would have a top to the top of the cage, and there would be weapons hanging from the top. I think weapons were still got involved here. They just brought them in as opposed to being available in the match. But this was an entertaining match. I mean, not the best match I've ever seen. It was Team Nash, BG James, Diamond Dallas Page. Team Nash consisted of, Kevin Nash wasn't on the team. His team consisted of BG James, DDP, and Sean Waltman. And Jeff Jarrett's team was Jarrett himself, Monty Brown, and the Outlaw, otherwise known as Billy Gunn. But they had to call him the fucking Outlaw because of copyright purposes. They would call him Cute Kip in the years that followed, which was an even worse name, but anyway. This was really just one giant brawl, which is really every Lethal Lockdown match ever. But it worked. I thought it worked for the people involved. It did not need to be anything else but a massive brawl when you have fucking Jeff Jarrett in there, DDP and Sean Waltman, and BG James of all people. It's like, this match will not be an instant classic. But for what it was, I thought it was enjoyable. They made good use of the 50 minutes that they were given, that they were allotted. And the right team went over. The babyfaces finally emerged victorious, and Jeff Jarrett finally got his without losing his fucking NWA world title, God forbid. But that was good. It was good. Not great, but it wasn't terrible either. Not as bad as it could have been, is what I'm saying. And then we get to the main event for the NWA World Heavyweight Championship #1 contender spot. It's AJ Styles taking on Abyss in a 6 sides of steel match. So this was great. I mean, honestly, I don't know if it's the best TNA match I've seen since I started reviewing these pay-per-views late last year, but it's got to be up there. I mean, I was expecting this to be good because AJ's fucking AJ. AJ Styles can get a great match out of pretty much anybody. And Abyss can always be a question mark, but this was really when the guy was at his prime condition. Physically, as a character, the guy was firing on all cylinders at this point. Abyss was. And they put together an amazing match. A lot of cool spots. It was never really dull at all. I mean, sometimes when I'm watching these shows, I'll be working on something else while watching the pay-per-view on the side. I couldn't devote any other time to watching anything else because this match was just one thing after another. And the dynamic was great, too, because you had AJ's high-flying offense mixed in with Abyss's, hardcore brawling style. Like the David versus Goliath, that typical, classic, long-term, traditional dynamic with matches and wrestling. That's what this had. And you throw in the steel cage, and it made the match even that much better with all the spots that AJ could do and Abyss selling for him, and it was great. And the crowd was into it. The commentators were going nuts every time AJ would do something insane. This was phenomenal. No pun intended. But AJ did go over, got the feel-good win. And again, easily, the best main event of any TNA pay-per-view up to this point, including the 04 pay-per-views, the 05 pay-per-view so far. This was amazing. And definitely capped off the evening on the best note possible. So easily the match of the night. If there's any one match to watch from the show, it would be AJ Styles versus Abyss inside the 6 Sides of Steel for the #1 contender spot to the NWA World Heavyweight title. And again, it's a forgotten hidden gem from TNA's history because I've never seen the match before, and I don't hear people talking about it. I don't see clips of it for whatever reason. But this was phenomenal stuff. So again, great main event, making the show definitely worth watching. I mean, the first few matches weren't amazing. Obviously, it's worth noting for Chris Candido's death in the opener. I mean, obviously he didn't die in the opener like Owen Hart style, but I'm talking about like the injury that he suffered led to his death a little later on. Other than like the fucking Prince of Darkness match, which was pretty bad, this was a very watchable show, which I can say for most TNA pay-per-views at that point. But this was a real watchable show and an enjoyable 3 hours of that. I mean, a little short of 3 hours, but still, I thought this was good stuff. And the second half of the card really made the show worth watching between the tag title match, the X Division title match. Lethal Lockdown was what it was, but it wasn't bad. It was enjoyable. And then the main event was amazing. So I would seek out Lockdown 2005 on the Global Wrestling Network. It's a great show, all things considered, and if only for that outstanding main event. So that does it, guys, for my review of TNA Lockdown 2005. Thank you for checking out the video. I appreciate it. Be sure to like the video, drop a comment, share the video, and subscribe to the channel for more daily content. We will be back next Tuesday with another all-new review, pay-per-view review of what? I'm not sure. I think it's WCW Great American Bash 1988, if I'm not mistaken. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I'm sorry. But that will be next Tuesday right here on WrestleRant. But, of course, there's plenty of other content here on the channel. I will be uploading, if I haven't already, all the videos I took at over the course of Money in the Bank weekend from Chicago to my video blog, to the videos I took at Money in the Bank. We got hashtag tomorrow. We had Network and Chill yesterday with Total Bellas. Another Network and Chill on Friday with a review of the WWE 24 Woken special, focusing on the Hardys, which was great stuff. WrestleRant radio excerpts talking all things Money in the Bank weekend, so on and so forth. So what are you waiting for? Subscribe today for all this content and much, much more. Anyway, guys, have a great rest of your week. I'm Graham G.S. Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.